You mentioned Cambridge University a couple of times there, and I know in the example you gave, you talked about their influence over the engineering faculty. The article I referenced right at the beginning of the conversation, Ian, you wrote in that about the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. For those on listening to this that hasn't heard of it, it's effectively a flagship program within a British university that seeks to educate future leaders on sustainability principles and what a sustainable economy might look like. And there's an accreditation kind of regime, as it were. So lots of people in the corporate world can go and sit this exam to tell them how they could be a sustainable leader. And I know this because I know people within the corporate world who sat it, and in many respects, it's seen as a bit of a gateway to certain sustainability careers. And when I read your article, I was pretty alarmed about this because coupled with this influence over the engineering department, thinking about technologies and all of those things, and then talking about sustainability leadership, and then listening to you talk about how in Britain there isn't a renewable project which doesn't have China involved. Obviously, I'm putting all those things together and sounding a little bit conspiratorial, but it does feel like there is fire behind this smoke, and that we ought to think a little bit more critically about big policy goals like the energy transition and net zero when we seem so ambivalent about where the technology comes from that are going to help us achieve those targets on a page.
Yeah, we need to think about it. I mean, to me, in a sense, a university can, I mean, the Centre for Sustainable Leadership is a fascinating one because it was opened, of course, by Prince Charles, as he was at the time, a £12 million investment. They refurbished the old post office building in Cambridge. But half the money for that came from a Chinese renewable company called Envision. And the investment by that company came at a time when its owner was a member of the rubber-stamped Chinese parliament, and at a time when that parliament had just squashed the last vestiges of democracy in Hong Kong. And, you know, this is the partner for that centre. None of that was particularly publicised by Cambridge. You would have had to dig around to have found these facts. And I believe that there's a duty to be transparent about the nature of these relationships. Now, if a university, whether it's Cambridge or anybody else, came forward and said, look, you know, actually our partner X, Y, or Z is involved in surveillance or security, or is a member of parliament who has been party to a law to expunge the last of democracy out of Hong Kong. If after revealing that, then we are still happy to go ahead and take their money, then that's fine. Take the money if you feel comfortable with that, with dealing with those people, but at least be honest about it and at least be transparent about it. But I think that the broader point that you make is if you look at renewables, and we have this goal of trying to be carbon neutral, and it is contradicted by the desire to become less dependent on China. We have, China is leading the world in electric vehicles, and they have put a lot of money, an awful lot of subsidies on many, many levels into developing electric vehicles and batteries, and before that, solar panels, to the extent that they dominate world trade, or soon will, in all of those. Now, the UK, like other global countries, is going to be hit very soon with a wave of Chinese-made EVs at a price substantially less than what we are used to paying for those EVs. Now, you know, if we embrace that, it is perhaps the quickest way to carbon neutrality, because it will mean that, you know, all these cheap cars, all these electric vehicles are suddenly affordable, but it will strengthen immeasurably our dependence upon China for renewables. Now, a lot of people may say, well, does that matter? I mean, because it will hasten the goal of decarbonizing the economy, but it will also make the West highly dependent on China for critical technologies of the future, where China has massively subsidized its businesses. It's not a green policy, it's an industrial policy. The production there is still overwhelmingly the result of burning coal, and the processing of a lot of the minerals that go into these batteries is a filthy process, and China's been prepared to tolerate far greater levels of environmental degradation to achieve that than would be the case elsewhere. Then we have the added factor of security, which has not really gone commented on as much as the economic and trade issues, because these EVs, even more, I mean, most cars these days are like computers on wheels, but EVs are almost more so. It's an average of about 2,000 chips per car. And we talk about spyware, being installed on different systems. Well, these cars are one enormous piece of spyware because they are connected, they are all the time exchanging information, and they can be shut down remotely. Now, two examples of this. In the early part of the Ukraine war, the Russians stole a whole heap of John Deere harvesters from a dealership in Ukraine. State-of-the-art harvesters, multiple computer-driven, took them back to China, tried to turn them on, but couldn't because they'd been disabled remotely from the United States. So it wasn't possible to actually use them. Now, if we look at the potential threat that comes from these cars, China gets it because over the course of recent months, they have banned Tesla cars from entering military or other government compounds in China. Now, Tesla, arguably Elon Musk currently is China's favorite capitalist because he has been allowed and been given multiple favors to build a vast factory near Shanghai. One of the reasons for that is because that will then encourage the EV supply chain that China sees as very important for its ambitions. So, it suits them both. They can use Musk can use them. Meanwhile, Elon Musk goes out and the man who calls himself a free speech fundamentalist will not say a peep against China. But anyway, his cars have been banned from what are regarded as sensitive places around China. And the reason for that is because the Chinese Communist Party gets the fact that these things are bristling with cameras, with sensors, they're connected, and they're a threat. Now, we haven't come even close to recognizing the potential of electric cars coming in from China as a potential threat. I mean, there's you remember that movie, The Italian Job, which was made and then remade. The first version was much better, actually, with Michael Caine. And it's about a bullion heist in Turin. And they actually get away with it because they cause chaos in Turin by closing down the traffic lights in the city. So there's gridlock, and they're able to use that as a cover to make their getaway. Now, not so long ago, Ian Levy, who was then the technical director of the National Cybersecurity Center in Britain, part of GCHQ, made a similar point when he was talking about Chinese smart city technologies and the potential danger of sort of effectively shutting down your city. Well, you can make a similar argument about EVs and the potential of weaponizing electrical vehicles. Now, the argument against that is to say, well, the minute a Chinese electrical car was found to be spying, it would ruin their industry. No one would buy them anymore. But this is not the sort of thing that would happen routinely, but it's something where if you, in a moment of conflict or tension, look at Ukraine, look at what happened because of our dependence upon Russian oil and gas. It's not something which happens unless there's a crisis. But the potential, if there is a crisis, of these things being weaponized, and I don't think that we've even begun to think through the implications of that. I mean, this isn't science fiction. These cars have incredible capabilities. They're calling home. They are sending and receiving data all the time about the driving, about the the health of the system. And that's all be going to China. You know, there's privacy issues there, but also quite profound security issues. So on the one hand, to come back to where we started this question, you have this goal of decarbonizing the economy, which is, a very important goal. But the quickest way of decarbonizing it, which will be to embrace all these cheap Chinese EVs, raises profound issues of dependency, of technological dependency and security.